Panelists and debaters, we have certainly heard an interesting debate today. As member of government, I am very proud to reaffirm that government absolutely stands in affirmation of today's motion. And as member of government, allow me to roll back my speech for you. I will first begin with my refutations directly to the previous speaker. I will then, go over how closing government believes that this model would be defined in the long term as to see those long-term projections. And then I will include two pieces of positive matter in that bolstering U.S. agriculture will inevitably include indigenous farms, as well as the fact that implementation of the model allows us to combat health crises in the United States, particularly healthcare. But first, on to my refutations. And on my first refutation, that dollar stores such as Dollar General and Dollar Tree have no transportation means. Government is contending that that sounds quite fallacious. These are corporations with well-known predatory business practices that will that will purposefully understaff their stores to the bare minimum skeleton crew amount to operate on the lowest possible operational margin costs. So government is kind of confused how there's no understanding that these large corporations that can perform predatory business somehow do not have means of transportation. If they have to be in rural areas anyways, then how is any of this product getting to these stores? There very clearly is transportational means for dollar stores in food deserts. So government does not believe that that point stands. And then in my second refutation that will also be touched upon, I'll take your POI in a moment after finishing refutation, in that this will only benefit industrial farms. Government has stated that through this motion that the subsidies would be going to all farmers. When we notate how much of American agriculture is comprised of small to mid-sized farms, where in government's model was there a notated exclusion of smaller farms or indigenous farms? This very clearly, through that model, you can ensure that those subsidies go to these comparatively smaller farms by just doing statistical analyses of production. When you then go, and then you can start to, comparatively assign those subsidies better to the smaller producing farms and support them more. I'll take the POI top half.
Yeah, panel, they cannot win the indigenous farmers point. Go back to my Hopi Nation example in the food colonialism point. We did a very in-depth analysis of how the land cannot produce high yield of crop because of the conditions of the land. Historically, they have always been unconditioned for survivability. Contend.
If those lands have been unconditioned for survivability, do the subsidies that support all farms in the United States also then not include industrial tactics to potentially help and bolster those soil nutrients? That is absolutely a tactic used in agriculture, and opposition is trying to state that that just does not exist whatsoever. There is absolutely an attempt, and if there's an attempt to be made, then we must be able to make that attempt to potentially help indigenous peoples. Now allow me to move on to my unique extensions on closing government, and that is that this simply just long-term bolsters the U.S. agriculture industry. As already notated, mid-sized domestic farms comprise 90% of farms within the United States. As provided by opposition, they're speaking about how these subsidies would only go to the largest farms. Again, if you just do a very statistical analysis prior to implementation of this motion, then you can comparatively look at which farms will need more support, which ones will need more logistics, and then you can comparatively assign those things down the ladder as necessary. I won't be taking a POI at this moment. So what do we see then impacting this out then? Because of the amount that because mid-sized farms would be able to produce more without the fear of over-surplus, because if farms surplus but are unable to sell, ultimately that is a capital loss. So since these farms would be subsidized in the long term, there is no fear of overproduction and not selling. Ultimately, they would be subsidized for the production. So again, there is no limitations in which the indigenous farmers would be unable to utilize these subsidies, and there is absolutely no limitation in which small to mid-sized farms farms that, again, comprise 90% of the U.S. agricultural industry, there is no reason through which they could not get these subsidies effectively. So ultimately, the long-term impact of which we're just going to see the bolstering of the U.S. agriculture industry, which is already one of the largest in the country. We are simply just wishing to bolster the U.S. economy at this moment. I won't be taking a POI at this moment, top half. And on to my second unique extension, and that we can start to combat the public health crisis in the United States. So, already notated, in many food desert areas, there is not enough genuine access to fresh and nutritious foods. This is either because of transport costs or just due to business models, therefore, such as Dollar Trees filling in for grocery stores in rural areas. So, when you then make it cheaper to produce said food, when you then basically change the status quo so that these businesses such as Dollar Tree and Dollar General are ultimately incentivized to change their entire business model to then incorporate these fresher foods to continue garnering business in these rural areas, this is deterrence. But what I mean by deterrence is when you include this tax on these ultra-processed foods, we're talking about a significant tax that at the very least makes any average consumer think twice whether or not they want the Cheetos or if they want the little tin of blueberries. At that point, when you consider the concept of deterrence and the average consumer's dollar has been more important than ever, this will ultimately disincentivize the purchasing of ultra-processed foods. By disincentivizing the purchase of ultra-processed foods, we can then start to see lowering amounts of chronic health ailments such as obesity, such as high blood pressure, such as high cholesterol. When you lower the total amount of people who are inundated with these chronic health concerns, you can start to actually combat the public health concern crises of the United States. We can all notate how bad medical care is. The medical care system of the United States is absolutely constrained by how many people are stuck with obesity concerns or with high blood pressure concerns or chronic ailments. So by implementation of the model, government is simply wishing to fix a lot of the public health concerns that are notated within the United States. Opposition simply wishes to maintain the status quo. Your vote must go closing opposition. Thank you.
Closing government, you mean?
Sweet. I want to thank that speaker for their remarks.